is Ashley Tyson. How you doing, buddy?
I'm fantastic, Jimmy. How about yourself?
Good to see you. No hat today. You're not at the beach. There's no dunk tank. Looks like it's a home game for you. You're just in your home office. But it's
I was
always good to
uh
see you.
I was actually supposed to be out hunting today,
Hmm.
and yeah, we had some situations happen that we had to reschedule and kind of reshift, but I was hoping to be, to have one of my Sherpa hats on and be out there shooting some quail,
Yeah, or
which would have
maybe
been actually fairly entertaining for everybody to be able to watch, but
maybe one of these days we can catch you in the tree stand. Although I don't know if
I
you
got to
like
be
making too much
quiet. I
noise
got
in
to
the
be
tree stand.
quiet in the tree stand,
I
though.
know
That's the problem.
that's the problem.
Duck blind, quail field. I think we'll be good with that.
There you go. All right, fair enough. Here's how this works. We're going to dive in once some questions start coming in. So throw your questions out there for Ashley. Anything opportunity zone related. We did have a bunch of questions from
I tell you
earlier in the
what,
day, though, that I want to
Jimmy,
get to.
Jimmy, if anybody can stump me, I've got a Sherpa cup, a Sherpa coffee mug just for them. So I will send it to them if anybody can come up with a question that can stump me.
That's,
So I
that's
don't get
pretty.
dunked, but I'm going to give them a coffee mug
That's pretty impressive. I thought you were going to suggest you were going to dump that coffee on you. Might be a little bit
all
too
over
hot.
my head. Do it like the what is it, the ice bucket challenge?
Yeah, something like that. I think that's what the kids were calling it a few years back. All right, let's move on to Gregory's question here. Greg had a question from earlier this morning about Puerto Rico. He says, "Hey, I'm looking to bring an investment into a Puerto Rico opportunity zone. It would include building 2 factories with 400 jobs. How long does the bureaucracy take behind such a process? Obtaining permit approvals? Is this process regulated by local or federal government or both?" So maybe you can speak to that.
And this is in Puerto Rico specifically.
Puerto Rico opportunity zone, 2 factories.
Yeah, so
It'll
it's that's going to be
create
governed
400
by the
jobs.
local. That's going to be governed by the local municipality, unless you are in a, I think they call it a maritime zone, which is if you're down by the coast, then you're going to have to get a federal permit from the maritime authority. And be wary of that because maritime permits are a lengthy process and they don't like a whole lot of change happening that's when it's close to the beach. But I'm assuming that if you're building a factory, that's probably going to be like up by Guaynabo or one of the other cities that are more industrial. And they are usually actually really, really helpful on trying to get those things done as quickly as possible because they understand that it's going to bring jobs, it's going to bring tax base, and they are all about trying to make stuff happen. You also may want to look at buying an existing building. I know there's a fair amount of those that are happening. There's a woman named Kira Golden that's actually got a huge warehouse space. I think it's actually in Guaynabo. But there's lots of different possibilities that you can use in order to get things going there. But more than likely, it's probably going to be a local thing. The great thing that you ought to be checking out as well is that for necessary projects in Puerto Rico, there's going to be a 25% tax credit. And so if you've got a manufacturing deal that you're doing, more than likely you could qualify for a tax credit with your project. And so make sure you run that to ground as well with a Puerto Rican expert. If you need a contact, if you need somebody to talk to down there, I'd be happy to connect you with some folks that can assist. But yeah, there's lots of different resources in Puerto Rico, along the lines of tax credits. Yeah, so we've got 3 hotels that we have invested in through our fund that you're in, Jimmy, and we're getting a 40% investment tax credit on all of the acquisition costs, on all of the expansion, and then the first year operational cost. So if you're doing manufacturing, you could get a 25% credit for that.
Fantastic. And just to clarify, there's no bureaucracy you need to go through to get approved just to start a qualified opportunity fund. But for getting the land permitted and getting the actual real estate deal done, yeah, you're gonna need to look to your local municipality for that, as you would for any type of real estate project. All
Yeah,
right.
that's actually an interesting point, Jimmy, and I'm glad that you brought that up because one of the things that you may want to look at if you're doing a qualified opportunity zone business in Puerto Rico, you're probably going to want to make your fund be a US based fund because qualified opportunity funds in Puerto Rico can only invest into qualified opportunity zone businesses in Puerto Rico. So if that's all you're doing, then that would be okay. But to the extent that you do it that way, you got to be careful about foreign ownership and that kind of thing. And so there's definitely particulars associated with doing deals in Puerto Rico that you need to be aware of. Sorry,
Great answer.
another Puerto Rico point.
I love it. All right. We got a bunch of questions that have come in the last couple minutes. Arthur asks, Ashley, if you have two publicly traded companies, maybe New York Stock Exchange, let's say, company A decides to buy company B using a stock exchange of A for B.
Yep.
You with me so far? There's a
Yep.
40% premium above the par of stock B. Does this trigger a capital gains event? And what is the amount of capital gain?
Yeah. So, I mean, it's just like anything else, right? So if you're exchanging things for value, then yeah, I think that that would trigger, a capital gain. By company B using a stock exchange of A for B, there's a 40% premium above the par. And so assuming that you get, an equal amount, and then, yeah, that absolutely would trigger a capital gain. And it would be for the amount of overage. So it's basically anything that you get of value over what your basis is, then that's going to be considered a capital gain. And so, um, you know, now interestingly enough, if you don't, it may actually be to where when you exercise that, and it may not create the capital gain until you actually sell it. Because if you're swapping things, typically that'll end up extending out, and typically that doesn't actually trigger a capital gain at that point in time. But I'm certainly not an expert in that, and I'm claiming that that's not an OZ one.
I think you
But
got partially stumped by that, but you answered it pretty well.
yeah.
Should
So
we?
you just got to use, so talk to your tax professionals, like specifically your CPAs, about that one. Because I'm thinking that it probably wouldn't trigger the capital gain until you actually monetize it. And then at that point in time, it's going to be whatever your basis is. And if you got a 40% premium, then that's what's going to be the capital gain at that point in time.
But that's a question for a CPA, or maybe for Jerry Ryson. Jerry Ryson's been our MVP so far today. So we'll see if Jerry might want to swoop in there and answer that one. Nirav has a couple of great questions here. Clarification on my earlier California, Indiana question. So actually, I don't know if you were here for this.
This is
question came
beautiful
up a couple hours ago.
Yes.
So I'm in California selling property in Indiana for gains. Indiana is conforming with OZs. California is not. Do the state taxes on capital gains that I'm investing in QOZ get deferred along with federal taxes, or will I still need to pay California state taxes this year? This is on the way in, not at the 10-year mark. California will need to get paid then. So this is a big question about state tax nexus, pretty much. So what can you tell us about all of those questions there, Ashley?
So the question is how he owns the property in Indiana. If he owns that through a partnership, and the partnership can roll that gain into a qualified opportunity fund, then he doesn't actually file a tax return in California. And so then when he gets his K1 in California, it will have showed that it's been deferred. So he wouldn't pay California taxes. So he's correct that on the way in, that if he can defer the gain through his entity that owns the property in Indiana, then he's going to be fine and he's not going to have to pay the taxes. If it's owned individually, then yes, he's going to have to go ahead and pay the state taxes in California because it's going to come directly to him. But if he owns it through an entity, then he won't. He can defer those taxes.
All right. Let's see. Another question came in from Nirav also. Do
short-term gains absolutely qualify for opportunity zone deferral, and people use that all the time. And the great thing is too, is that not only do short-term gains qualify, but if you have short-term and long-term gains and you have short-term and long-term losses, then you can decide that you don't want to have to offset those short-term gains with your losses, and you can preserve those losses and defer the short-term gains. So that's another strategy that we see people use all the time.
Okay. Jerry did comment on Arthur's question about the company A and company B stock exchanging. He says, as to the stock exchange question, it is likely that the transaction will be undertaken as a non-taxed transaction. So if a non-taxed transaction, there would be no capital gain. So that's Jerry's input on that there.
And he's saying that, and it confirmed that I think that the swap would be non-tax, but then when you go to exit it, your basis is going to be what determines your capital gain. So a capital gain is what your proceeds are. So what you sell something for over your basis, that generates capital gain. And so because you had a swap, there wasn't actually a transaction, but when you go to sell it later on, you're going to have that 40% premium now, and that's going to drive your capital gain.
Fantastic. All right. This is a good one about 1031 proceeds from an anonymous attendee. Anonymous attendee asks us, if an investor has 1031 proceeds in escrow with a qualified intermediary and both the 45-day and the 180-day period fall in the following next year, and the investor cannot find a suitable replacement property, when would the 180-day period start for OZ investing? I think this came up on our Ask the OZ Expert session that day you were in Italy last year, Ashley, if I recall correctly. What can
Yes,
you tell us about this one?
absolutely. So, 1031s actually present an extra potential for where you can actually start the 180 days. So typically your 180 days is going to start for a stock sale, or when you own a property directly, it's going to start on the date of sale. In the event that it's coming through a partnership or an S corp, then you have got the option to start the 180 days as of the date of sale, or as of December 31st, or as of March 15th. So you've got 2 extra times when you can start that 180 days. Now, if it's a 1031 transaction and you elect to treat it as an installment sale, and you actually have to file that election, then you can start your 180 days when you receive the proceeds from the 1031 qualified intermediary. So that gives you an extra 4th option on when you can start your 180-day period.
You could potentially get 2 180 days if you really stretch it out, and you get the money back from the QI on day 180, and then that gives you another 180 days. There's a lot of flexibility there if your 1031 exchange gets busted for whatever reason. All right, here's a question from Jerry. He's trying to stump you, I think. Question for the OZ Sherpa.
I'm going to send you a mug one way or another, Jerry.
When a QOF is looking at investing in an existing business in an opportunity zone that might be a QOZB, what is the date/time frame when that business must prove up that it is a QOZB in order that the QOF can know its investment in the business is actually qualified opportunity zone investment property?
So technically and this is actually on the Opportunity Zone cheat sheet, and we'll go to that real fast as I share my screen. And if anybody wants a copy of the Opportunity Zone cheat sheet, they could go to ozpros.com and they can download that from our website. And we've got that right here. But if you see on here on the Opportunity Zone cheat sheet, your QOZB investment requirements is that when a QOF acquires interest in a QOZB, it must be a qualified Opportunity Zone business at the date of acquisition. And so it needs to technically be a QOZB as of the date of acquisition. Now, the definition of QOZB, though, Jerry, and so this is where it could get a little bit, a little bit wonky, if you will, is that you got the 70% of your tangible property owned or leased as qualified Opportunity Zone business property. And that's typically the hardest one for the QOZB to meet. But if they've got a working capital safe harbor plan in place, when they receive that money, then technically the 70% test is turned off. And so that could go towards them being a qualified Opportunity Zone business, even though they may not have the full definition of qualified Opportunity Zone business property as of the date of investment. As long as they have that working capital safe harbor plan in place when they receive the money, then I think that they shut that one off. Now, the big one that they do need to be able to prove is this 50% of business needs to be from an active trader business that's happening inside of an Opportunity Zone. So they need to be able to show that via their hours of where their employees or independent contractors work.
Fantastic. Well, I don't think you got stumped there, Ashley, but you should just send Jerry a mug anyway. Let's see. Thomas asks in the chat here, what are mortgage or loan requirements for captive QOF reinvestment? Non-recourse loan or mortgage is enough to get financing and reinvesting directly inside a captive QOF to grow portfolio faster? Question mark.
So I don't know that there are any. I mean, so the only thing that, you've got to have, and the only implications around a partnership debt, qualifying debt for a partnership as for a qualified opportunity fund or qualified opportunity zone business, whether it's a captive or not, is that it needs to be proportionately guaranteed. And so it can't be disproportionately guaranteed in order to be able to get basis. But it's literally just surrounding basis that it's an issue. As it relates to debt, I mean, it could be recourse, it could be non-recourse, it could be any kind of debt, and it's going to be okay as long as, you've incurred that at either the QOF or the QOZB level.
All right. Jerry has just requested that I bring him up here because you screwed something up. No, he just has more to add, is what he said. So I'm
Sure.
bringing Jerry back up. While Jerry comes on, I can see if we've got another question
Let's
here.
hit Rob Parisi. Does Hawaii have the same issues as Puerto Rico?
There you go.
And so not the same issues, right? So Puerto Rico's got extra incentives, and I think that's what I was trying to point out. Hawaii's going to have more, I think, complex, specific requirements relative to what you can and can't build, and it might be a little bit. Well, it's funny is that I say it might be a little bit harder to navigate the approvals depending on what island you're at. And that's going to drive whether the folks are going to be more amenable to seeing investments or not. And so the good news about Hawaii, though, is that because it's a state, most of their stuff is conducted in English, whereas in Puerto Rico, most of their stuff is conducted in Spanish. So issues, opportunities, kind of take that as you see.
Jerry, you wanted to chime in. What do you got for us, Jerry?
Yeah, so I recently did this with a very interesting early stage company that's doing mid-altitude balloons for cell phone service in underdeveloped areas. And they happen to be located in a New Mexico opportunity zone. And I have a QOF wants to come in and invest. So I'm having Novogradac do a analysis as whether they're QOZB as of last December 31st. But having researched it, the actual testing question for the QOZB is actually December 31st of the year in which the QOF makes the investment. And if on that date it's a QOZB, it's a QOZB for the whole year vis-a-vis QOF investing, which surprised me to learn that.
Huh.
I mean, I would have thought it had to be 12. To be careful, I'm doing it on 12/31 of the previous year because I don't want my client to be in the dark, the QOF. But interestingly, and then Jay Darby just did a paper on this, that it's as of the end of the year in which a QOF invests in a QOZB that it has to determine that it's a QOZB, and then you're good for the rest of the year, for the whole of the previous year.
Awesome.
So you were actually right, but that as of the date of the investment, the QOF works, but you got to look at the end of the year.
And it can be, so, I mean, that's good because then it gives you till the end of that tax year where they made the investment to hit that, to hit all 5 tests.
And it gives you a chance to correct stuff and whatever.
Yeah, right? That's great.
Anyway,
I'm a big fan of abundance of caution. And so we've just been telling people, hey, get it done by like when you make the acquisition. But that's great that's great feedback.
Yeah, but you don't have really good financials except at the end of the previous year to make those judgments anyway. So that's the process. We're doing more and more operating company deals. So, which I think is going to be more and more the case as we get closer to the end period of this, as people start looking at a bonanza of unlimited tax-free upside and venture capital investing. But we're developing a whole set of covenants for QOZBs as far as what they have to deliver, how they have to comply. Because every year at December 31st, they have to be a QOZB thereafter for the QOF to stay in compliance.
Well, and then you've also got to have a mechanism by which you can actually put your interest back to them in the event that they're not, because to the extent,
or have a make whole provision. I mean, we're looking at different kinds of provisions in this regard. Yeah.
I'd much prefer to be able to give my interest back to them and then have them make me whole on, what the tax ramifications would be, because, I got to get it out of my portfolio. I got to get it out of my QOF so that way it doesn't jack up my 90% test.
Exactly. Yep. Mm-hmm. Anyway, I thought you never quit discovering things in this space.
It's good stuff, man.
All
Well,
right,
and
way to go, Sherpa.
yes,
Jerry,
sir.
thanks for chiming in.
I'm
All
sending you
right,
a
take
mug,
care.
man.
All right, bye-bye.
All right.
And I actually got Sherpa coffee too.
Jerry's getting a
I'm gonna
mug.
send
Do you
along
have
with it.
Wait, hey, hang on a second. Is there really such a thing as Sherpa coffee? Do you have your own
I got
roastery?
Sherpa coffee, man.
I need some
The
of that.
special blend.
I'm calling you as soon as this is over. We need to talk. Let's move on to a few more questions. We only have a few more minutes left in this segment. Let's see. I want to do this one. Another anonymous attendee. Can I sell property that I own in a qualified opportunity zone to a QOF that I am an investor in?
So, yes, and this is where it gets. And so I'm
Yes,
glad
but
that
with a huge asterisk, right?
exactly. So number one, and technically you can sell it even if you own more than 20%. The key is that you were an investor in the QOF before you bought the property. And it needs to be an investment made from capital gains that's separate and apart from the sale that you made. Because if you did that, then if you were to sell property and then reinvest that money back into the fund, or to make the investment after you sold the property, the IRS has got an argument that that is a circular cash flow transaction, and it's going to invalidate the property and invalidate your investment. Now, if you own less than 20% of the fund, then your property is going to be qualifying. If you own more than 20% of the fund, then the property will not be qualifying. And so you'll need to do 2.5x worth of improvements to the property in order to get it inside of your 70-30 good asset versus bad asset test.
Great answer. Jay asks, if I have a long-term capital gain in Washington State and my state wants 7%, if I moved this to an OZ op, do I still pay the state tax, or does the OZ allow me to avoid it? So I guess Washington must have a 7% capital gain tax rate, I'm guessing.
I believe that Washington is still complying. And so, yes, if you were to invest into an opportunity zone, then you're going to defer that 7% tax. And I know that I can't remember if Washington's one of the states that introduced decoupling legislation. I don't
think they
I've
have.
seen,
No,
yeah,
I posted, somebody else asked about that list a few
I've
minutes
actually got the
ago.
list.
And I do have the list somewhere. Let me see if I can find it again. But I know just off the top of my head, it was California, Massachusetts, North Carolina, New York. I think there was one. Mississippi was one more of them also.
Correct. And then Illinois has introduced legislation, but it hasn't passed yet.
All of the other states either don't have a capital gains tax rate, or they do, and Washington state's is 7%, but they do fully conform with the federal initiative, the federal benefits. So if you have any questions or doubts about that, consult with your CPA. They'll know more. Let's see. So I think we answered that one. Oh yeah, Jay chimes in. If that is correct, that is awesome. And we do believe that is correct. So thank you.
So we got some in the chat, Jim.
We have a bunch of them in the chat. So here's one from Aspara, asks, if I buy a property in an opportunity zone for $350,000, the land is worth only $100,000. So do I need to make upgrades or add new square footage amounting to 250,000? How much of the upgrade can I do a bonus depreciation on? So it's a two-part question there.
Okay, so how much is the land worth?
Land's worth 100, and the building's worth 250. So here's your substantial improvement example. Different numbers there, but same concept.
Yep. So you're going to have to spend $250,001 in order to hit your substantial improvement amount. And then what you're then going to be able to do is to bonus depreciate, to do a cost seg study on that aggregate building for for basically, now $500,000. And you're usually going to get between 35 and 40% in the form of bonus depreciation out of that. And so that would be on your existing building plus the value of the improvements that you put into it. You get to exclude the value of the land when you're calculating substantial improvements, and land is not eligible for bonus depreciation.
Is doing a cost seg study worthwhile for a building that is only worth 500 grand?
Well,
What's like the break-even point where you would consider it worthwhile or not worthwhile?
so our cost seg experts will do a study for it's around, I think, like $2,500.
Oh, okay.
So, I mean, if it's going to cost you $2,500 and you're going to get, roughly and so the rule of thumb is between 30 to 40%. It's usually right around 35. And so, that's $150,000 worth of depreciation, bonus depreciation that you're going to get. Now, we've dropped down to where you can only take 80% of that now, but still, I mean, and I think that, I don't know, Jimmy, is it likely that it's going to get through or not? The
I
bonus
think
depreciation back to 100%?
I think it'll get through. It might take until the end of next year, but I think there's going to be some serious tax legislation that's going to go through in 2025. Kind of depends who the president is and what the balance of power is in the House and Senate, but I think we'll get some sort of tax legislation in the next, what is that, 21 months or so. It's my best guess there. Hopefully OZs is part of it. Hopefully bonus depreciation is part of it. This current tax bill, I don't know how much of a chance it has of getting through the Senate. It seems to be a little bit stalled in the Senate at the moment.
Yep.
Okay, Ashley, we are out of time. We have to move on to our next presenter. If we didn't answer your question and you still have questions for the OZ Sherpa, Ashley, where can our attendees today go to learn more about you and OZ Pros?
So if they go to ozpros.com, they can find it. They can get our Opportunity Zone cheat sheet there. And I believe we've got a special promo for them at ozpros.com/podcast. That's a landing page that we've got, that's for when I've been on your podcast before. And so especially go to ozpros.com/podcast. You can schedule a discounted strategy call. You can also bounce us questions. We do a weekly mastermind where we answer questions just like this. It's literally almost exactly like this, where it's rapid fire Q&A, all things compliance, all things Opportunity Zone. We also discuss other kind of wealth preservation strategies and tax mitigation strategies like oil and gas and solar. We're doing private placement life insurance now, conversations in there as well. And that's called OZ Ascent. And if you go to ozpros.com/podcast, you can get promotional pricing on all of that. Strategy calls, Ascent, or if you need us to set up your QOF or QOZB, we do that as well. And I'm going to answer this real fast for Muzang, is that you can absolutely set up a captive OZ fund, have 1% ownership. And as long as you're renting out the single family home, then yes, you can do it. And that's exactly what we specialize in, is setting up captive funds for folks just like that.
Awesome. Ashley Tyson, great time chatting with you as always. We got a lot of unanswered questions, so please do head to ozpros.com/podcast to learn more and contact Ashley and his team through their platform at ozpros.com. Ashley, thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Jimmy.